You were once a person with no memories at all. Not a single one. You cried, you laughed, you learned to recognize your mother's face before you could even hold your own head up. And yet none of it survived. Somewhere between the moment you were born and the moment your earliest memory begins, an entire version of you vanished without a trace. Most people call this baby amnesia, but the real answer is far stranger. Think about your own earliest memory right now. Maybe it's a birthday party. Maybe it's a trip to the beach. How old were you? For most people, that memory sits somewhere around age 3 or 4. Everything before that is simply gone. Not fuzzy, not distant, gone, as if it never happened at all. For a long time, scientists assumed babies just weren't paying attention, that infants were blank little sponges, absorbing nothing worth keeping. But that turns out to be completely wrong. Babies are learning machines. In their first year alone, they master the sounds of their native language. They learn to recognize thousands of faces. They form deep emotional attachments to the people who care for them. Their brains are not empty. They are working harder than they ever will again in a single stretch of life. So if babies are learning constantly, why can't you remember any of it? The answer lives inside a tiny seahorse-shaped structure buried deep in your brain called the hippocampus. This is your brain's memory factory. It's the part responsible for taking your daily experiences and converting them into memories you can call up years later. And here's the twist. In infancy, this structure is still under construction. Neuroscientist Nora Newcomb has spent decades studying this exact question. Her research shows that the hippocampus continues developing well into early childhood, adding new neurons in a process called neurogenesis. Every new neuron that gets added has the potential to disrupt the delicate web of existing connections. Imagine trying to keep a library organized while construction workers are still installing shelves. That's essentially what's happening inside a baby's brain. But there's a second piece to this puzzle, and it's even stranger than the first. Even if a baby's hippocampus could form memories, there'd be nowhere to put them. Memory doesn't just require creating a file. It requires a filing system. And to build a working filing system, you need language, a sense of self, and a timeline of your own existence. Psychologist Catherine Nelson has argued that autobiographical memory only becomes possible once a child develops what's called a self-concept, the basic understanding that you are a continuous person moving through time. Before that self-concept exists, experiences may register in the brain, but they don't get stored as things that happen to me. There's no me yet to attach them to. This is where things get genuinely unsettling, because it means your earliest years weren't a blank void. You were there. You were feeling things, forming bonds, reacting to the world around you. It's just that no version of you existed yet to file those moments away as memories. Here's a question worth sitting with. If you don't remember it, did it still shape you? Researcher Carolyn Rovey-Collier ran a series of studies with infants using a simple setup, a mobile hanging above a crib, connected by a ribbon to a baby's ankle. When the baby kicked, the mobile moved. Infants as young as 2 or 3 months old quickly learned this connection. Weeks later, when placed back under the same mobile, they remembered exactly what to do. Their legs started kicking immediately. This tells you something remarkable. Babies can form memories, implicit ones, procedural ones, the kind that live in your muscles and instincts rather than in a story you could tell someone. What they can't yet form are explicit memories, the kind you could describe out loud, complete with time, place, and a sense that it happened to you. This is the same reason you flinch near a hot stove without consciously recalling every time you've been burned. Somewhere in your infancy, your brain built patterns of caution, comfort, trust, and fear. None of it comes with a memory attached, but all of it is still running quietly underneath your adult behavior, like an operating system installed before you can even remember the installation. Which raises an even bigger question. How much of who you are today was decided before you could remember any of it? Attachment researchers have found that the bond an infant forms with a caregiver in the first year of life can shape how that person approaches relationships decades later. Not because they remember specific moments of being held, or ignored, or comforted. They don't. But the emotional blueprint gets laid down anyway, wordlessly, memorylessly, and it becomes the foundation everything else gets built on top of. So, in a very real sense, you are still being shaped by a version of yourself you'll never be able to visit. No amount of therapy, journaling, or hypnosis can pull those years back into view because they were never filed away as retrievable memories in the first place. They didn't disappear. They were simply never written down. Some researchers believe this amnesia isn't a flaw at all. It might be a feature. A hippocampus, busy growing new neurons at a breakneck pace, maybe prioritizing rapid learning over long-term storage. Babies need to absorb an enormous amount of information quickly: language, movement, social cues, survival basics. Holding on to detailed autobiographical memories might actually get in the way of that kind of fast, flexible learning. In other words, you may have traded permanent memories of your first years for the raw processing power needed to build everything that came after. Now think about how differently you treat memory as an adult. You take photos to preserve moments. You write in journals so you don't forget how something felt. You get anxious when you can't recall a name or a face, as though forgetting were some kind of failure. But your very existence began with years of total, unavoidable forgetting, and it didn't stop you from becoming who you are. Maybe memory was never really the point. Maybe experience is what actually shapes a person, whether or not it gets filed away as something you can consciously replay. You still carry those years, not as scenes you can rewind, but as instincts, comforts, fears, and patterns woven so deeply into you that they never needed a memory to survive. You were building a self long before you could remember doing it. And the strangest part is, you're still building it now, one experience at a time, most of which you'll also eventually forget. So the next time you try to reach back for your earliest memory and find nothing there, understand what that emptiness actually means. It isn't a gap in your story, it's the foundation of it, quietly holding everything else up, exactly where you can't see it.